Good afternoon and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, welcome back to our study in Matthew 16, 27 and 28. We are in video number 4, I do believe. And what I want to do this afternoon is begin to really demonstrate that Matthew 16, 27 and 28 did in fact prophesy the second coming, that is the covenantal presence return of Jehovah in AD 70, in fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. And here very simply is my argument. Matthew 16, 27 and 28 was drawn from Old Testament prophecies that prophesied the second coming of Jesus. Therefore, Matthew 16, 27 and 28 prophesied the second coming of Jesus and placed that coming in the lifetime of Jesus' disciples before all of those who were standing in Jesus' midst had tasted death. Now, to do that, we need to do two things. Number one, we need to demonstrate that Matthew 16, 27, 28 did in fact draw from Old Testament prophecy. And number two, that Old Testament prophecy did in fact prophesy the eschatological second coming of Christ. That is the return of Jehovah, his presence to his people. Okay? So I want to begin to do that in this video. And the first text, the first prophetic source of Matthew 16, 27, 28 that we want to look at is Daniel chapter 7. So here is my argument. Once again, Matthew 16, 27, 28 is drawn from Daniel chapter 7, specifically 13 and 14. That is the prophetic source of Jesus' words. But Daniel 7 prophesied the second coming of Jesus. Therefore, Matthew 16, 27, 28 prophesied the second coming of Jesus based upon Daniel 7 and placed that second coming in the lifetime of the first century generation. Let's begin to demonstrate this. Go with me to Matthew 16. Let's read verses 27 and 28. Jesus said this, "For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels and will then repay every man according to his deeds. Verily I say unto you, there are some of those who are standing here who won't taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Go with me down to Daniel chapter 7. Notice the similarity of language. Daniel 7, 13 and 14. "I kept looking in the night visions. Behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples and nations and every man and language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom one which will not be destroyed." So in both texts, we have the coming of the Son of Man to establish his kingdom. Okay? Clearly, Jesus is Daniel's Son of Man who was to come to establish the kingdom in Jesus's lifetime, and that is in his own generation. But let's take a closer look at these two texts and prove that Jesus was drawing from Daniel based on more than just similarity of language. We want to show that these two passages are identically parallel based upon the constituent elements in these passages, okay? These are parallel based upon the covenant elements and the context of the overall passages. Notice this. Let's take a look at these parallels. In Matthew 16, 7, as we read, we have the coming of the Son of Man in glory, verse 27. Well, in Daniel 7, we have the coming of the Son of Man in glory, verses 13 and 14. In Matthew 16, 27, we have the presence of angels. He will come in the glory of his Father with his angels. And in Daniel 7, we have the presence of angels. Now, it's not explicit, but listen to this. He says thousands upon thousands were attending him. That is attending the Father, when the Son would come in the glory of his Father. So we have the presence of angels in Daniel chapter 7. In Matthew 16, 27, it is the context of judgment. The Son of Man comes to reward every man according to his deeds. And by the way, that is a vindicative judgment, as we've seen. Jesus comes to vindicate his own death and the suffering of his servants. In Daniel 7, we have the context of the Son of Man coming in judgment. We have myriads upon myriads who stood before him, and the books were open. That is in Daniel 7, 9 through 10, and 21 to 22. And by the way, in Daniel 7, it is also a vindicative judgment. He comes to repay those who had persecuted the saints and had wore down the saints for time and a half a time. Beautiful parallel. In back to Matthew 16:27, we have the context of the establishment of the kingdom. Verse 28, the Son of Man will come before all of those tasted death in his kingdom. And in Daniel chapter 7, it is the time when the saints received the kingdom. And Jesus comes to receive a kingdom of glory and dominion. That is in Daniel 7, 14, 22, and 27. And finally, we have a parallel of time. In Matthew 16, 28, Jesus limits his coming in the glory of his Father with his angels in the context of a vindicative judgment to his generation. Some of you standing here, he said, to his generation will not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Well, in Daniel 7, his coming in vindication with the presence of angels in the glory of his Father, etc., is placed at the time of the fourth beast, in the days of the Roman Empire, Daniel's fourth beast. Well, guess what? The Roman Empire existed in Jesus' generation. We have a perfect parallel of time. Daniel limits it to the days of Rome. Jesus narrows that time down further to his own generation during the reign of Rome. We have perfect thematic parallels and perfect constituent element parallels in both Daniel 7 and Matthew 16, 27, 28. What does that mean? That means that Jesus speaking and prophesying in Matthew 16, 27, and 28 was in fact drawing from Daniel 7. That means the coming of the Son of Man in the glory of his Father to reward every man according to his deeds and to establish his kingdom would be in fulfillment of Daniel 7, where the Son of Man will come in vindication of the suffering of his saints to establish the kingdom and to reward his servants with the kingdom. And Jesus placed that as being fulfilled in the lifetime of his own disciples. Now, here's what's important. That being true, we have to next establish that Daniel 7 was actually prophesying. It looked forward to Jesus' final second coming. If we can do that, then we have definitive proof that Jesus prophesied in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, his final consummative second coming, his parousia. And at that time, he rewarded the saints with the kingdom. He took vengeance upon his enemies. And that was fulfilled at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. All we have to do next is establish that Daniel 7 did in fact prophesy the second coming of Jesus. So we'll do that next time on Answers on Eschatology. We'll see you then. Bye for now.